Good noon, everyone. Today discuss about the computer-aided process synthesis. Unit number 4, synthesis of heat exchanger, and this theory about threshold approaches temperature. In this case of this, some discussion about there. Okay, તો સ્ટાર્ટ કરીએ આપણે થ્રેશોલ્ડ અપ્રોચ ટેમ્પરેચર અને સમ એક્ઝામ્પલ. ઓકે, પછી જોઈશું આપણે ઓપ્ટિમમ અપ્રોચ ટેમ્પરેચર જોઈશું. First of all, the threshold approach temperature. In many cases, the selected delta T minimum જે ઇન્ટરવલ પર આપેલું હોય, સિમ્પલી ધારો કે ટેમ્પરેચર 10 ડિગ્રી આપેલું હોય તો આપણે 10માં કોલમમાં ઇન્ક્રીઝ કરવાનું રહેશે આના બેઝિસ પર. ઓકે, such that no pinch exists and maximum energy requirement design calls for either hot or cold utilities to be used also, but not both. The critical delta T minimum below with no pinch exists is referred to as the threshold approach temperature. Some differences in the delta T theorems. The following two examples illustrate how this arises and demonstrate how the guidelines presented previously are adapted for a heat exchanger networking design also. Okay, this is the threshold approaches temperature. This is example 10.12. Compute maximum energy requirement starting the following streams as a function of minimum approach temperature. In many cases the selected for delta T minimum પર રજીસ્ટર છે. એમાં સ્ટ્રીમ આપે છે આપણને H1, H2 અને C1. 2 hot phase છે અને સિંગલ કોલ્ડ 1 phase છે. Okay, the selected delta T minimum is such that no pinch exists and our maximum energy requirement design calls for either hot or cold utility to be used, but not both. The critical delta T minimum below the which no pinch exists is referred to as the threshold approaches and the temperature differences also. So delta T threshold, the following two examples illustrate how this arises and demonstrate how the guideline presented previously are adapted for heat exchanger networking. This is the threshold approach temperature. Okay, now example 10.12. સિમ્પલી આપણને ડેલ્ટા ટી મિનિમમ આપ્યો છે 10 ડિગ્રીનો. આમાંથી આપણે મેક્સિમમ ટેમ્પરેચર જે હોય તે લઈ લેવાનું. ફર્સ્ટ ઓફ ઓલ તો 300. પછી એ કયા ફેઝમાં છે તે બી જોવાનું રહેશે. ધેર ઇઝ અ કોમ્પ્યુટ મેક્સિમમ એનર્જી રિક્વાયરમેન્ટ ફોર 300 હોટ ફેઝ 1 માટે, 300 hot phase 2 માટે અને 30 cold phase 1 માટે. then also TDS 200 hot phase માટે, 250 hot phase 2 માટે અને 200 C1 phase માટે. now આપણને કેપેસિટી આપી છે કિલોવોટ પર ડિગ્રી સેલ્સિયસ 1.5 to 1.2 ઓલ્સો અને Q કિલોવોટમાં આપ્યું છે 150, 100 અને 204. so for a delta T minimum is equal to 10 degrees Celsius. No pinch exists as shown in a figure 10.24. As using the temperature interval method, known that 46 kilowatt of cold utility are required when the analysis is repeated as a delta T minimum is varied for delta T minimum greater than 100 degrees Celsius. Pinch exists as illustrated in figure 10.24b for a delta T minimum is equal to 105 degrees Celsius. And figure 10.25 shows that the threshold delta T minimum is the cooling requirement is a constant at a 46 kilowatt. No energy is saved while capital costs are increased as the delta T minimum is decreased also, and the impact of the delta T minimum on the economics of a heat exchanger networking is considered in a section 10.6. Okay. The following stream is a this line, hot phase 3 and a cold phase 4 type patch. Then this is the values. This database is now is a how to find out the maximum temperature and the minimum temperature. Delta T is a 50 degrees Celsius. Okay. So design a heat exchanger networking at the threshold approaches temperature difference is delta T minimum is equal to the delta T theoreticals is equal to 50 degrees Celsius. To meet its maximum energy requirement, target is a hot phase માટે minimum is equal to 217.5, and QC minimum is equal to 0 kilowatt as well as its NHX target of the 7 heat exchanger for these values. Now find out the delta H1, delta H2, delta H3, delta H4, and delta H1, delta H2, delta H3 is a cold phase and a hot phase બંને માટે find out કરવાનું રહેશે. So how to find out the temperatures basis? This is a 175. Then delta H2 is a first of all 290 degrees Celsius. Then temperature difference આપણે 10 ડિગ્રી આપેલો છે 50 ડિગ્રી. Okay, the temperature interval, energy balance and the residues, for example 10.12, the delta T minimum is a 10 degrees Celsius and the 105. The temperature intervals, energy balance and residues, for example this one, delta T 10 degrees Celsius, delta T minimum 105 degrees Celsius, and although no pinch exists, the maximum energy requirement, a designed procedure is used starting at the cold end where matches are placed with delta T1 is equal to delta T minimum is equal to 50 degrees Celsius and reserving the allocations of the utility. It is until the last further more of the matches at the limiting delta T minimum must have this cold hot phase less than cold phase, as occurs on the hot side, and also the pinch in the maximum energy requirement for a design procedure as seen in the figure 10.26. The first match is made for bearing in mind that no cooling utilities allow, and the stream is H3 must be cooled to 150 degrees Celsius. Since C2 is the only cold stream that can be used, the internal heat exchanger 1 is installed with a heat duty of 505.6 kilowatt and which complete the cooling requirement of a stream H3. Similarly, the second match is between stream H2 and C4 with a heat duty of 341.1 kilowatt, which complete the heating requirement of streams for a C4. The remaining matches are for less constrained and are the positions with a relative age, not that the last unit of positions are the auxiliary heaters with a total duty equal to the maximum energy requirement targeted. Also, 7 heat exchanger are utilized, 5 internal heat exchanger, and the 2 auxiliary heaters. Note that this network has no heat loops and stream splitting is not employed. This is simply graphically. Minimum utility requirement are the functions of a delta T minimum, for example 10.12 basis. Okay, see this the graphically method આપણે જોઈ ગયા છે QC minimum, QH minimum અને delta T result. Now this is the graphically method. Optimum approach temperature આપણે next lecture માં જોઈશું. Now threshold approach temperature, in many cases the selected delta T minimum in such that no pinch exists and a maximum energy requirement is design called for the either hot and cold utility માટે છે, but not both. The critical delta T minimum below which no pinch exists is referred to as the threshold approaches temperature differences, and a delta T threshold. The following two examples illustrate how these arise and demonstrate how the guideline presented previously are adapted for a heat exchanger networking design. This basis for this is the solution part. For a delta T minimum 10 degrees Celsius, no pinch exists as shown in a figure, and the figure 10.24 is using the temperature interval method. Note that the 46 kilowatt of cold utility are required when the analysis is repeated, as delta T minimum is varied for a delta T minimum greater than 100 degrees Celsius. Pinch exists as illustrated in a figure 10.24. For a delta T minimum is equal to 105 degrees Celsius. In a figure 10.25 shows the threshold, and the delta T minimum is equal to the delta T theoreticals at which the pinch appears, since no heating utility is required for a delta T minimum less than delta T threshold, where the cooling requirement is constant at 46 kilowatt. No energy is saved while the capital cost are increases also. As the delta T minimum is decreased, the impact of the delta T minimum on the economics of a heat exchanger networking is considered the 10.6 sections. Okay, this is the ગ્રાફિકલી મેથડમાં આપણે જોયું કે હોટ ફેઝ માટે અને કોલ્ડ ફેઝ માટેની ટેમ્પરેચર ઇન્ટરવલ કેટલો છે. For no pinch exists, the maximum energy requirement designed for the procedures is used for starting and the cold end phase, and where matches are placed, the which delta T is equal to delta T minimum is equal to 50 degrees Celsius, and a receiver in the allocations of the utility iters until the last further the matches at the limiting delta T minimum must have the cold hot phase less than cold phase, as occurs on the hot side of the pinch in the maximum energy requirement and design the procedures as seen in a figure 10.26. The first match is made bearing in the mind of that no cooling utilities is a low and stream H3 must be cooled to 150 degrees Celsius since the C2 is the only cold stream that can be used internal heat exchanger for part 1 installers. Okay, this is a simple graphically minimum utility requirement. Thank you so much.